Hey, welcome back, everybody. Mark from Rams Up here. Thought it would be a good time to revisit my roster locks, one preseason game in the books. How much can we learn from one preseason game? Well, not as much as the coaches are learning from these joint practices and scrimmages and training camp itself, but we'll give it a go. I think there are a lot of conclusions we can draw. And by the way, a couple of roster moves since I last did this. We all know Tanner Brown was released, the kicker. And the Rams have signed a defensive lineman, Carlos Watkins, 6'3", 305 pounds. So that just kind of complicates the situation a little bit. Most of my predictions are under the assumption, that guys are going to be healthy and going to be able to suit up, not going to be on IR. I don't know the severity of some of these injuries. But let's take a look at this. Now, the last time I did this, I kind of screwed up. I had 37 roster locks, but I had left out the inside linebackers. So this is just a fresh look at it. And the way I do this, a little rule I have applied to this for myself is once I put a player on the roster lock list, I'm not taking them off. And that'll just be a measure of how well I did. I'm not pulling guys off and on. If they're on the roster lock list, not going back. And there's a couple of guys I've already second guessed myself on. And I'll point those out as we go. So let's take a look at this. I got this nifty slide sheet here for you, starting with some of these offensive positions. I got two quarterbacks, and, Stetson Bennett is likely going to be there on day one, but you could see a scenario where if he performs poorly in the remaining preseason games, the Rams make a move. Can they roll with Stetson Bennett as their lone backup weeks 1 and 2? I know my guest, Ian Martinez, does not have a good feeling about that. I don't think Paul Wallia does either. We all saw that. I think there's some potential there, but we better see, just like Sean McVay said, we better see some real quick growth from Stetson Bennett, or the Rams could make a move there. And I would be wrong on my roster locks here. And Jimmy G excluded because he's on, he'll be suspended those first two games. And if Bennett is there, what happens when Jimmy G comes back? Are they going to carry three quarterbacks? Kind of feeling the answer to that is no. Would Stetson Bennett make it to the practice squad? Your guess is as good as mine. Now, the running backs, I do have a new addition, Boston Scott. I've been rolling with Kyron Williams, Blake Corum, and Ronnie Rivers all along. I added Boston Scott to that group. And the wide receivers, Kupp, Nakua, Robinson, Whittington, and Atwell. And Atwell's one of the guys, I probably moved him to the roster lock list too early. Just don't know what to make of him. As Paul Wallia pointed out, if you're a wide receiver and you have been designated the kick returner, that's not necessarily a good sign as far as how you fit into their plans at wide receiver. And there's a couple guys chomping at the bit to get on this roster. We'll talk about them at the end here. And then the tight ends, no change here. Parkinson, Allen, and Hunter. And Miller Forrestall, probably not going to be there. Probably not going to happen for him, but he did look good. Next up, offensive line. Lyric Jackson, Jonah Jackson, Steve Avila, Kevin Dotson, Rob Havenstein, Joseph Noteboom. Those are kind of no-brainers. I think the Rams will end up carrying at least 8, likely 9, possibly even 10 offensive linemen. I think it's going to be 9, though. And then the 3 special teamers pretty much nailed down their roles with Tanner Brown being released. So we're up to 23 roster locks. And we'll go to this next slide here. And we have the defensive line, Turner, Brown, Fisk, and Davis. We'll talk about the 3 guys fighting for perhaps 2 spots in a minute here. On the edge, versus Young, Hoyt, and Brennan Jackson. Really competitive after those guys. And linebacker Jones, Roseboom, and Reeder. Now, Reeder, a new roster lock. And why? Well, he didn't play. He didn't play in the preseason game. Now, that could possibly be because they were unsure of Ernest Jones' status. But regardless, I'm putting him on the roster lock list. Along with Jones and Roseboom. I didn't have linebackers at all last time, so they're all new, technically. That was just my mistake. And they're probably going to roll with 4 because these guys are typically very valuable on special teams. We'll get to that in a second. And then, so we're up to 34. And then we got the cornerbacks, and this may seem cornerbacks and safeties. This may seem like a short list. White, Williams, Durant, Cam Curl, John Johnson, and Quentin Lake, because they're going to carry 9 or 10 defensive backs. It's just super competitive, and this is where we're going to get the biggest surprise, I think. So we're up to 34 plus 640 players. So what do we do next? Let's take a look at the guys that are on the cusp. Well, quarterback Jimmy G suspended. He will eventually be on this roster. Wide receivers, Tyler Johnson and Xavier Smith. They could both end up on this roster. And that's where Tutu Atwell has to be a little bit worried. Offensive linemen, these are the guys in the hunt for those remaining spots, in my opinion. Although Zach Thomas played pretty well too. We have 6 already, the 5 starters plus Noteboom, and then Leviston, Limmer, Bruss, and a Curry, all with a realistic shot at making this roster. The defensive line, after the 4 we already talked about, Durden, Murchison, Deshaun Johnson, and the newly acquired Carlos Watkins. Maybe, Johnson and Murchison are both banged up. Durden played well. Who's going to make it? Your guess is as good as mine, but there will be a couple guys from this list on the final roster. And then you have Hampton, Mathis, and Thomas. I should have put Van Valkenburg on here as well. Keir Thomas and Van Valkenburg. Mathis had a quiet day. Hampton did not. Hampton looked really good. They have 4 that I've already accounted for. How many edge rushers do they carry? And then inside linebackers chasing a roster spot, Hummel, Fatukasi, Spates, and Neal. And again, it gets really competitive. Hey, 13 spots left after the 40 that we already called roster locks. And then you have the defensive backs, a bunch of guys. I don't think I even listed them all here. Yeast, not a roster lock yet for me. Jacobs, Tomlinson, Jolly, Tanner Ingle. I did not include Jason Taylor, the second-year player. And then there's Charles Woods. Charles Woods is an undrafted free agent that reportedly has been shining in camp. Didn't see a whole lot in the game from him. Didn't look at the all 22 tape like Ian did. But hey, sometimes you have a quiet day. You don't you don't get your name called during the game, and you're a cornerback. Might be a good reason for that, not necessarily a bad thing. And then this is a final look at and then here we have a final look at the roster counts and how it could come down, how it could go. So we have 40 roster locks. I don't think we're going to carry 3 quarterbacks. I think we're going to add a wide receiver, Tyler Johnson and or Xavier Smith, or we add both of them and Tutu Atwell's days are over. I'm just guessing here, but bear with me. This is just for fun. We'll find out more as each week goes by. But hey, it's fun to talk about. It's fun to talk about if you're a podcaster, not if you're a player's parent, probably. But hey, it's a business. Some of these guys are going to get cut. The offensive line, I had 6 on there already. I think we're going to add 3. Defensive line, we're going to add 3 more. I think we'll get to 7 defensive linemen. And that could be a little much. Maybe it'll be 6, but it's my best guess. One of those 3 edge rushers will make it, one of those inside linebackers, and one of the defensive backs. So you'd have 13 of the guys we talked about that are on the cusp joining the 40 roster locks, and that would give you 53 players. And it'd be interesting to see how close I am here. It's, fun stuff, sort of, kind of. I think the Rams, I think this shows the Rams are actually in a pretty good situation with a lot of their position groups. The decisions are going to be tough. But as someone said on Twitter, I think it was the other day, don't know if the Rams have been this deep across their roster in a long, long time. They've been known for having a roster that's top heavy with a lot of high-paid stars, and that's still true. Aaron Donald, Cooper Kupp. It is true, but I think we've also got a very deep roster thanks to two really good drafts, back-to-back drafts. We have 3 sixth-round picks making waves here already. Jordan Whittington, Tyler Davis, and potentially Bo Limmer. And man, I feel really good about this roster. Some good players going to get cut. Some good players going to end up on the practice squad. That's what I have here in between the first and second preseason game. That's how I see this roster situation today out here from Rams Up.